Hello, and welcome to It's 420 Wyoming. I am your host, Red Hawk. Thank you for joining me for our third interview of the year. Wyoming Normal is planning to have special guest speakers on the 20th day of each month at 4:20 p.m., so tune in. Today's special guest is Madonna Long. Madonna is the owner of Summit Services and Supplies in Wyoming. She is a respected and established personality in the disability community who works with disability organization leaders and businesses around the United States. She is a consumer advocate working in government relations and public policy for the disabled populations. She grew up in Nevada and Wyoming, the places she loves. Welcome to the podcast. Um, can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
So I grew up in Wyoming. I grew up obviously in Nevada too. Lived in Rock Springs and in Kimmer. And in 1981, I was involved in a school bus accident that killed two of my friends. One of them was my best friend, and then it paralyzed me. And I have 4 children. I have 2 grandchildren. And I've worked in policy and a lot of different policies, really, some related to disability and then obviously some not. I ran for state assembly in Nevada in 1994. And I really enjoyed that. I really loved politics. And I became close to Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. And I worked a lot with Senator Mike Enzi and obviously the delegates in Wyoming now on disability policy. A lot of stuff really had to do with really around mobility, right? And for different types of maybe equipment, right, to work for people with disabilities. And that equipment usually meant wheelchairs, and it meant technology that went with those wheelchairs and making sure that people had access to the new technology that was coming out and working with Medicaid and Medicare to pay for those. And so I worked on Capitol Hill for about 16 years with Quantum Rehab. And I got to work with all the disability leaders all over the country. So I got to know a lot of great people. I also got to meet a lot of the representatives that really worked on disability policy, who were members of Congress, right? So I got to be friends with a lot of them. And it really kind of enabled me to have not only a seat at the table when we were talking about equipment or things that we needed, but it gave me kind of this big list of friends and advocates that if somebody calls me and says, hey, I got a call today from a good friend of mine in Nevada, and she's like, we're thinking about changing a word and it has to do with disability. And I was like, well, you probably want to call so-and-so and they'll help you. And so that's sort of what I've done. And I worked with Wyoming Normal, obviously, on the initiative to get medical cannabis on the ballot. And that was a great thing to do here in Wyoming, and trying to get people, our legislative people, to hear advocates all over the spectrum to talk about this issue.
Yes, yes. That's all a lot of really good stuff. I believe there is no doubt that the working class Wyoming citizens are in favor of some type of cannabis legalization. However, it seems that the Wyoming legislators have trash canned the effort for years. What are some of your thoughts on positive ways forward for legalization in Wyoming?
Well, when we first went up there, the first time we had to get it out of committee. And we did a good job getting out of committee, and then they weren't going to put it on the floor. And they sort of stonewalled it, just like what you're saying. They're stonewalling it, and they're not listening to the patients, and they're not listening to the people of Wyoming because I'm thinking if you looked at, I'm sure you guys have those statistics that in Wyoming, veterans, people with disabilities, that can absolutely benefit from medical cannabis are, what are they, 80% of Wyoming? I mean, it's a big number, right? So
Mhm.
so why aren't they listening to those people? Like, what's their problem? We've got Montana up here doing it. We got Colorado over here doing it. Utah is working on a lot of their stuff, and I think they've got, you can have a medical cannabis now in Utah. So what's with it? Like, why? And I think that's better for them to really probably answer. And those are the questions we should be asking them, right? Because what I learned when we were up on the hill with everybody at Wyoming Normal was that even when we were talking to those members, like they should be talking to their buddies and their friends and their colleagues and getting them on, because they had folks that were severely that had all kinds of different disabilities or ailments or diseases that medical cannabis help. In fact, we had one guy who was a legislator who had to go out of state and break the law because he was because I think he had Crohn's disease. I think that's what it was. And if they couldn't have even done it for their colleague, right? Like, what's wrong with them? And um, I just really think that they not only will it be an opportunity for people in industry in Wyoming, but we are losing so much to our neighbors because people are going to go get the medication that they need. And this is a medication. That's really what it is. And they refuse to, I believe, understand that.
Mhm. Mhm. And I heard a lot of folks say that cannabis legalization will ruin Wyoming. They say, look at what has happened elsewhere. I personally don't agree. What do you think? Would cannabis
I don't agree with that.
legalization ruin Wyoming?
You know what? They don't give you any facts, do they? They give you any facts about why it will, or is that just what they say? Because yeah, they don't come up with any facts of why that. And okay, so if that's the problem, look at what's worked in each one of those states, and take the best part of that, put it in Wyoming's program, and learn from their mistakes. No, they don't even want to learn from their mistakes. They just want to go on and say no. And I think that a lot of people with disabilities, if you look at people that have cerebral palsy, right? If they have CP, what cannabis does for them and their spasms and the things that they can't control, that they don't want bad medicine. They don't want drugs that they can have. But
Mhm.
you know what? Is anybody listening to them? I really haven't quite figured out why Wyoming has just sort of drugged their feet, um, because I think that we weren't really even being hit really bad by the police associations. I mean, they would be the ones that I think were the numbers of the percentage of them that were against it. But it still was, we got people going to jail for transporting their medicine through Wyoming. They don't have a prescription of it, but yet, hey, you can transport your oxycodone through Wyoming, but you're not going to jail for it, right?
Mhm.
I don't know. I think that we just need some level-headed people, and I
Yeah.
believe that there are a lot in the legislature in Wyoming that we just need to convey the message a little bit better.
Yeah. it's a shame that so many people from Wyoming have to leave the state to get cannabis for medical issues, and they have to break the law just to take care of themselves.
Yep.
I think that if you have a medical cannabis card, you should be able to go from state to state.
You
It
should be
only
able
makes sense.
to. And, that was one thing I was hoping that the Biden administration was going to get through, was they were just going to legalize it across the board. And we didn't get that done. And that would have been a big win because we've got even county commissioners and local leaders who are for this. I'm thinking that seriously, vaping might be a little bit worse for you than medical cannabis, but you know,
Yeah.
I just think we have to have a better message. I think we have to be more organized. I think that we need to work better on funding so that we can get people out there. We did great on signatures for what we had going on and the amount of resources that we had when we initially started the ballot initiative. I thought that we did phenomenally good. And I think if we do it again this next time, we can allow the citizens of Wyoming to go ahead and make it legal, because obviously their legislators are not listening to them.
hmm I think so. And we also need to educate people about safe cannabis use. I feel
Yes.
like yeah, not a lot of people even know about cannabis, especially in
No,
Wyoming.
I don't think they do. Yeah, I don't think they do. And there's strict laws, like they think, oh, it's going to be here for my kids to get. No, it's not. Your kids can't walk into Ridley's and get a prescription for oxycodone, can they? I mean, if you get a prescription for it and you go that route, then no, your kids aren't going to get it.
hmm
Besides that, if they're going to try to do that, um, they've probably been trying to do it illegally right now anyway. And I think that having a good structure for what needs to happen in Wyoming, and I think we did a great job on how we presented and how we put together the initial uh, ballot initiative, and brought in people that talked to the legislators and brought in some pretty smart and informed people to help them. But
hmm
then they just decided it was going to set over in the corner, and they weren't even going to have the guts to put it to a vote.
Yep. And I feel like a lot of people are scared that cannabis is a gateway drug to other harder substances. And I don't think that's the case. I think it just depends on the person.
It just like anything, they could say that about alcohol, and alcohol is legal, but it's look, most people that self medicate on anything, it's because the medications that are out there, the pharmaceutical drugs, are not working for them, and cannabis is a healthy alternative for them to use. And I don't believe they're going anywhere else, majority on them, as far as a gateway drug. um, I think just that it's individualized on how people are going to utilize their medication. I mean, I have my daughter has a lot of pain, and she's able to use medical cannabis to help her with some of her back pain and things that she has. And it helps her tremendously, and she doesn't have to use pharmaceutical drugs. So,
hmm Okay, well, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be
okay,
right back.
all righty.
welcome to It's 420 Wyoming. I'm your host, Red Hawk, and I have my special guest here, Madonna Long. Now, I think a referendum seems to be the way to go to get Wyoming legislators moving on legalizations. What are your thoughts on getting this going?
I think that'd be a great idea. I think that that would be a great idea. I think that that's something we probably need to follow up on. It's really about also um, getting back organized in communities, right? To because you've got to be able to have the people to be able to talk to all these folks around Wyoming and educate them better, right? And I believe it's just another thing that we've got to reorganize again, right? Get reorganized again, and I think that that would also help with that type of initiative.
Yes, it seems to be the way to go to get legalization going, I think. Um, I think, industrial hemp has a lot of potential in Wyoming, but there's huge stigma against it here. And also,
Right,
it's not very profitable to grow it in Wyoming.
right. I've heard that. I've heard that. Um, and I think because the hemp is in a lot of different products, right? I mean, and that was it. The reason that it wasn't very profitable to grow in Wyoming was based on what factors?
You have to pay for them to test your hemp every year, and you also have to pay for a hemp license.
Right. And I think they did that. Was that sort of like to deter folks
I
from
think
doing
so.
that from really, yeah, I think that that really was to deter them from not growing hemp because it could lead to cannabis growing. But again, it's like we're setting out here like we're on an island in the whole United States with no water around us, that we've got other states that are doing just fine.
Hmm.
They're 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 making they're making a lot of money, and those that kind of funding, although it's not a zillion billion dollars that we would make here in Wyoming, but it would help with education. There's maybe it'd help us with roads. Maybe it'd help the communities with different types of programs they need for veterans, or maybe people with disabilities, or mental health. I don't know, but it's a source of funding that they just want to kind of throw out the
Hmm.
door and then, not address. But everybody else is going, it's working for us.
Yeah. And hemp is very, versatile. It can be a lot of different things. People can make hempcrete, and they can build, you know, really nice buildings out of it. Or you can make a hemp shirt or hemp paper. So there's really a lot of different, ways they can turn the hemp into something that you could sell. I don't think that's the problem at
Well,
all.
and is the history of hemp like, if I'm right, back in the, I don't know, 20s, or maybe before that, was when Carnegie and Mellon, and I think some of those guys put a stop to um, cannabis and hemp and a lot of those things, because hemp, you could be an alternative source for paper, right?
Hmm.
And some of those products, and they didn't want their lumber mills to be
Yeah.
losing out, and they stifled that and did their negative campaign way back way back then, that we're still kind of working against today. And it's because there's so much better uses for it, and certain people might not like it because it's going to maybe put their existing business out of, maybe be in competition with them.
Yeah. And I think that's why people have been so harsh towards cannabis is because it could potentially take out a lot of monopolies in America, like the drug
Just
monopoly.
pain,
Yeah.
right? Just pain medication. Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of really rich people are scared that they're going to lose their money.
Well, and you know what's so I have a lot of friends all over the country. I have a used to be my neurosurgeon in Pittsburgh, great guy, fabulous neurosurgeon. When Pennsylvania when Pennsylvania legalized cannabis, he owns a lot of cannabis. He owns a and it's great that he's doing that, right? I mean,
Hmm.
so it's just like but it's going to take money and funding to be able to get the message out there because like I said, it's not the people of Wyoming that don't want it. It's the folks, it's that 1 or 2 3% that are kind of misleading other people to their
Yeah.
own agenda, I think.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you, what are some ways that cannabis can help disabled people?
So a lot of different ways that um, a lot of adults with cognitive disabilities, vision, multiple disabilities, um, um, it calms people. Okay, so it has a calming effect on a lot of people with disabilities. It can be, I think, from about 2015 and on was really where people with disabilities in their states that legalized it could really have those health benefits, right? I think um, when you look at the ways that it obviously can help a lot of people with spinal cord injuries, um, uh, or people that have CP have a lot of spasms and spasticity. What spasticity does is it tightens up your muscle like it's a knot. And cannabis will really be able to just relax those muscles, and it allows some people who have CP the ability to communicate because with CP, a lot of that tightness in those muscles has to do with communication, and that also helps significantly with some of those folks. And then you've got veterans with PTSD. So if you want to talk about that whole mental aspect, right, of
Hmm.
post-traumatic stress syndrome, and veterans or even people with disabilities or seniors or anybody, that medical cannabis and cannabis helps tremendously opposed to other kinds of pharmaceutical medication.
Yeah, I think so. I think veterans should definitely have the option to use medical cannabis. It makes sense. If
It
there's
it
something
it
out
it
there
does,
that will help them. Yeah.
and the other thing is, if you looked at the list of when you see those commercials, well, you could take this, and then it gives you all the list of things that it might uh, harm you,
Hmm.
right? The secondary conditions, and they're this long, right? They're that long,
Hmm.
and you're like, what do you got from cannabis? I might eat a little more. I might go to sleep. I might be relaxed. What does it do? Right? It doesn't
Yeah.
do anything compared to what those lists are from those pharmaceutical companies on what you can take for pain medication or any kind of calming medication.
Yeah. And I also heard that cannabis can help people with digestive issues.
Yes. Yep. And you
Yeah.
know what? I don't know a lot about that, but I definitely have heard that.
Yeah. I think it's very interesting that it just has a whole calming effect for your entire body. not just your brain.
Right, because if your intestines and your, everything from your esophagus down to your stomach is all, again, tightened up like those spasms would do to you, and it relaxes it, it allows your body, I think, to probably just normalize what it should do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We're gonna go ahead and take a quick break and watch a music video.
Okay.
Seen her out in LA playing with the band. In Carolina, dancing on the sand. She's a star that's slipping through my hands, like the ones that fell on Alabama. She's red, white, and blue. Red, white, and blue. She's my kind of girl, 'cause she's red, white, and blue. She'll get you high as the Colorado skies, and she shines like those New York City lights. As tough as Texas, and brother, she just might knock you to the ground if you start a fight. She's red, white, and blue. Red, white, and blue. She's my kind of girl, 'cause she's red, white, and blue. She'll wait there in the harbor, holding up her light. She'll bring a fallen soldier home underneath her stripes. She's red, white, and blue. Red, white, and blue. She's my kind of girl,
welcome back to It's 420 Wyoming. I am your host, Red Hawk, with my special guest, Madonna Long. So, what are some of the ways the average citizen can help advocate for cannabis legalization?
Well, anytime you're going to advocate, it's really sort of telling your story. I found that most average citizens just going up and having a conversation with somebody in the coffee shop or talking to like-minded people about cannabis, because more than likely there are 10 other people in your community that feel the same way you do. They just haven't had a conversation with you, or maybe you haven't had a conversation with them, right? So I think the best way is to organize small groups, right? Go to the coffee shop, go talk to, get a group together and ask, hey, do you know anybody else that would like to join our group? Um, Grassroots advocacy is the most successful. When you look at people um, that can benefit from cannabis in Wyoming, seniors, it's the group is huge because you have senior citizens, you have people that are all types of ethnicities. That doesn't matter. It really is just could be people in your church. It could be people that you work with, and get together and start talking about it, and then get back to Wyoming Normal. Have those people report back to Wyoming Normal, because you've got to be able to know what people are thinking. You got to know who's on first base, right?
Mm-hmm.
And once you know that, I don't think anybody 20 years ago in the wheelchair industry had an idea that a little blonde girl in a wheelchair, that the Senate Majority Leader adored her, and and that she could be a resource for them to change the way and get laws passed to be able to help people with disabilities get their mobility products. I didn't become an advocate because I was going down that path, but what happened was went to go get wheelchair tires, and I was listening to a guy that owned the place where I was getting wheelchair tires. He was going to have a problem with Medicare. I just said, hey, maybe my friend Senator Reed could help you with that. And that happened to be the majority leader. And they said, hey, could you help us do this? Right? But it's that
Mm-hmm.
conversation. Like, once you have that conversation and you get 4 or 5 people together, you could go do, it's nothing special about me. I was just having a conversation with a guy who needed help. And I think that that's the way that we build coalitions, we build friendships, right? Because it's not about Democrats, it's not about Republicans, it's not about independents, not about anything. It's about people's health, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a worthwhile conversation to have. And so, but you got to sit down and get a couple of your friends together and organize. And then you have to have that organization like Wyoming Normal to be able to report back so that they can go ahead and help lead the initiative.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think it's important to keep people up to date on what's going on with cannabis.
That's
You
why I love
can.
you're doing your podcast. I love to hear that you're doing your podcast, because I think that that's what that's going to do. It's going to be an avenue for somebody to come listen to.
Mm-hmm. And I think that not a lot of people are talking about it, which is surprising, because you'd think that it would be a big thing online, but it's really not that big.
Well,
And yeah.
because you got to reach out to those people. Like I said, you got to get those, it's like a bunch of ladies that used to sell Tupperware, right? How'd they go sell Tupperware? They had a party. They talked about it in their house and they sold it to their friends, right? It's the
Mm-hmm.
same concept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think eventually, it's just going to keep growing and growing, and we'll reach out to more people, and yeah, I'm very hopeful for the future.
Well, good, because you guys were all getting old. You guys are young. Got to carry the torch.
Yeah, yeah. The sooner we get cannabis legalized, the better. Because, farmers, they're just waiting to start growing hemp. A lot of them are. And I feel like once
Yeah, we need
it's
to be able to do it.
will do so, almost everyone will. Because it's so good for the soil. It helps the soil. It'll actually take out some of the bad stuff that's in the soil. And the roots can go deep underground and bring up minerals for the other plants, which I think is interesting. And also, it saves on water too. You don't have to water it a whole lot.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that. I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
and the
How
leaves
are
can
the
be.
young how are the young people your age? Like what's how are they organizing?
I feel like a lot of young people don't really understand how it all works, so they just kind of stay out of it. Unless there was, a piece of paper in front of them saying, sign here to make cannabis legal. That's about all they understand. And it's not their fault, it's just it's very confusing. Intentionally
Yeah.
so, I think. There's a lot of different things that you need to grasp. A lot of different like keywords that you need to understand.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I think a lot of young people are ready for legal cannabis. They're all for it.
Yeah, they just have to sort of know how to organize, right? Once they get organized and they get into those groups, and they become to where maybe they go and they sit down and they talk to folks coming out. When we were working on the ballot initiative, and we would go and we would go to events like farmers market, it was amazing the people that would come up and say, we need this. So events are a big thing you got to go to. Go
Hmm.
sit down, take a table, take some information, make some brochures, and saying, hey, can we keep your information to keep you informed, right? Because you need to build your list of supporters. And if you go to those events and you have a little booth out there with signatures, and it takes their email and their phone number,
Hmm.
well, those are voters, okay? And those voters, you know, can call and talk to the legislature. And like I said, you're never gonna know who can help you push your cause along, right?
Hmm.
And who they might know to sway that person who's a leader.
Yeah. And I've actually been to farmers markets selling CBD, and there was a lot of people who didn't know what it was. They thought it was THC because to them, when they see the cannabis leaf, that's all they think about is THC.
Right, right.
And really, there's this whole other, spectrum to it with CBD that is good for you. You can just take it as a supplement with no
Yep,
buzz.
yep, yep. We have a
And
lot of
a lot of
CBD
people, yeah,
here.
CBD is good. I really like it. I think it helps
Well, we just
balance you out. Yeah, and it's
well,
important that you get.
it's just a moving part, you know. You got to just keep doing it. And um, how many members currently right now does Wyoming Normal have? Like current members, because that's another thing. Ask
Mm,
people to be a member of Wyoming Normal too,
yeah.
and be a paid member, because $30, whatever that amount is a month, is nothing if you're committed to having medical cannabis, or any type
Hmm.
of cannabis in Wyoming. Um, People need to pay their $30 and help the organization lead the cause.
Hmm. And it's hard to find people who are willing to do that. It really is. And it's surprising that there's so little people who will actually do that.
You know what? You need to ask them this. You need to say, what would you do to make sure that cannabis was legal in Wyoming? And they'll probably say to you, well, anything. Well, would you skip a coffee, 2 coffees at Starbucks or at the coffee shop to give us a year's donation? And I guarantee you, I bet they'll give you that $30.
Yeah.
You just got to
Yeah.
sort of change the way you ask them, right? Like,
hmm
how important is it to have medical cannabis? Can we sign you up for a membership? You don't have to do
hmm
anything. You're just supporting us to help get the word out and help our leaders recognize the importance of it.
Yeah. And I think that since it's illegal in Wyoming, a lot of people are scared to do anything with cannabis because they think that, they're going to get arrested or something. And a lot of people, they can't risk that at all.
Right, right. Well, especially like think about it if you're on disability, right? Or you're
hmm
on anything. It's a that's where we're sort of shaming people, right? We're sort of shaming them.
hmm
I think Wyoming will come along. I was sort of hoping it would be way before now, but I really do think that it will. But what we have to get is a concise message. It has to be easy. We have to ask people for membership so that you guys can continue the fight because Wyoming Normal is the only real organization that spearheads this issue and and then you start asking those other organizations of all of those stakeholders, right? All the people with disabilities groups, you get them involved and you get them to help participate, right? You can't do it alone. You got to be able
hmm
to have the people that it's going to benefit.
Yep. And I think that,
And
yeah, we'll get those people over time, you know? What eventually we'll find a whole team of people that'll help us get this done, which I think is
yeah,
what
yeah,
we need to work for.
yeah.
That's what we
And
really need.
you're going to get those 1 or 2, and they're just going to be little. They're going to be little comets, and they're going to be out there, and then you're going to find that, wow, how did I find these people? But you got to ask them.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Is there anything, you want to say, final words, closing out for the podcast?
Well, I think that Wyoming, we're a group of people that love Wyoming. We love our neighbors. We care tremendously about folks. And I think that this is where, if you are in support of medical cannabis, that you call Wyoming Normal, you join them and you become kind of a leader in your community so that they can have the branches that they need to help pass this, because it takes a village, it takes a town, and it takes a state, and it takes participation for everybody to help.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree. I agree. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me on. It was awesome, and keep doing what you're doing, because it will happen. It's going to take a little work.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.